On behalf of the Humanity Project, want to say thank you for the opportunity to engage in a discussion with our school resource officers here in the Fond du Lac School District. And just really appreciate your time and your work and the opportunity to have a conversation that I don't think is had in many school districts across the country. So really appreciate the opportunity that you are bringing for our community to really see more about what you do and what you hope to accomplish as school resource officers. So to start us off, the first question I have for you today is just why did you want to become a school resource officer? Officer Tuttle, do you want to get us started?
Sure, I can start us out. So for me personally, this is my 23rd year of law enforcement, and I've worked patrol for 23 years. So I was sort of getting, at that point in my career, it was getting a little burnt out, let's put it that way, on the road, where I thought, let's try something else. I talked to some of the other school resource officers, and I thought it would be a good fit for me. I have 2 children of my own. One's now in college and one's just finishing up his senior year. And I hear stories from them at school. And I wanted to give it a try. And I put in for the position and was lucky enough to get selected to do this job. So I've been out here now at the high school. This is my 3rd month. So pretty new in regards to it, but starting to get the hang of things.
Emilio, please come to the office.
I enjoy working with the kids. I guess what I've seen so far out at the high school is, there's a cycle that you're dealing with a lot of the kids over and over. So it's nice to try to get more personable with them, where they see you as a person, so that problems that they've had in the past, maybe they don't feel that they want to act that way again, because they see you now more as a person and someone that they like to get along with. So they change their behavior, and it helps the school out and getting them the education that they need to finish up here at the high school. But that's the reason, just a change of pace for me towards the end of my career.
I'll jump in there. For me, and again, I'm Officer Kawan Brown. My reasoning for wanting to become a school resource officer had a lot to do with just being able to have an influence on the kids and the youth. I spent a lot of time working with the kids in the community and joking around with them. And I felt that as a school resource officer, it'd be a great opportunity for me to build some quality relationships, see where some students might be able to be guided down a better path, or given some guidance in some different areas. And perhaps I'd be able to assist them with that. And so far, I feel that I've been able to make a lot of great connections here, and I've enjoyed it for reasons that I never would have thought of in the first place, inclusive of being able to help problem solve some different things and work with the kids. So that was one of the main reasons that I wanted to get involved with being a school resource officer.
Thank you, Officer Pimentel.
Yes, I'm Officer Pimentel. I'm over at Savers Middle School primarily. I do cover a couple other elementary schools in the STEM Academy, but most of my time is at Savers Middle School. And I think for me, one of the things that I wanted to do the most was make connections with the future of our community, and really learn about them, try to make their life better, and make sure that within the school environment, we're being the most productive that we can, and to maintain a safe environment. And, for me, it's been 2 calendar years I've been in this position, but this is part of my 3rd school year, because I started in the halfway point of the school year. And I've learned, and as time has gone on, we've really made great connections and kind of breaking down some of those barriers that some of the kids had with law enforcement in general. And I think a lot of that comes from those connections. And you know, it's an evolving process. It's going to continue to take time and trust. And for me, that counseling piece of what we do is also one of the things that really inspired me to become a school resource officer.
I'm Officer Sandra O'Donnell. I have Tyson Middle School and then 3 elementary schools. My big reason for becoming a school resource officer is I was always very kid-driven from the start of my career, working with the daycare facilities and interacting with the kids there and developing programs to build positive relationships from that age on. Just to kind of change the perception of law enforcement was a big reason to become a school resource officer as well. You know, to be able to be out there and not be that, you know, traditional looking female, and to be different and to show kids that anybody can be a police officer and that police officers can be a positive personality in their environment and help them grow. And to also have preventative measures in place to try and keep kids out of the system and help them find ways to be successful and connect families to resources in the community, just to kind of mitigate issues in schools before it becomes a problem. That was one of my big goals of becoming a school resource officer.
Thank you all. And again, thank you for your service in the schools. I think it's a very unique position, and one I appreciated hearing about. Coming into it, some of you thought working with kids in the schools was right something out of the gates in your profession. And then for some, it kind of came as your role evolved. So what has been your biggest learning in this role so far?
Again, Officer Kawan Brown. And before I get into that, I will say that I am the school resource officer for Woodworth, Chagrin, Roseno, and Roberts Elementary. In terms of what my biggest learning, the biggest thing I've learned in my role so far, I would say that it's been learning to problem solve through validation, empathy, and also clear communication, and getting a buy-in. So what I mean by that is, if I have personally gone through numerous situations where I've gone in and dealt with situations from, let's say, something as small as parking, student issue, a parental complaint. And if I don't understand what the problem is or what the complaint is actually rooted in, I can come up with a solution that doesn't really make the individual who is complaining feel as though they have been validated. So without that validation or that buy-in from them, I still have not technically fixed what the actual issue is, because I'm just trying to knock it out. So what I try to do whenever I'm dealing with these situations is I'll sit down and try and have an empathetic ear. I'll communicate and talk to them. What is going on? And if it feels as though there's something underneath, perhaps I'll go in deeper there. From there, I'll validate how they're feeling by getting a buy-in from them, allowing them to have the opportunity to have an input into my solution or what I'm going to be doing. Because again, if I go through and I decide what I'm going to do in that situation and take care of the problem based on what I want, I could do 15 different things. However, that individual will not feel that they had an input. And so now it has not been completed or taken care of the way they want it. And now they don't feel validated. So I typically will talk to them, find out what is going on with them, lend that empathetic ear, and give them the opportunity to give some input and have them involved with finding a solution. And from there, I found that even if I went and did 50 different things, took care of a lot of paperwork, I will get done and still not be done because now I'm still fielding more calls from this person who is upset. Where if I involve them, have that empathetic ear, validated them, and allow them to have that buy-in, I could do far less and they will still feel as though the problem was taken care of. And that's what truly matters one way or another. They're the ones who are complaining, understanding what they want, and then doing that as opposed to just doing what I think needs to be taken care of. That was a huge learning point, but it has helped me in working through situations and also truly eradicating a lot of problems by communicating and problem solving through validation and empathy.
Thanks, Officer Brown. Does anyone else want to add to that? The question of what has been your biggest learning, or perhaps what's been your biggest challenge in this role so far?
I guess for me, just starting out here in the high school, I'm starting to see that stuff that matters to these kids, they're very emotional about it. And it never occurred to me, I mean, being a adult in law enforcement for that many years and dealing with a lot of big issues and concerning things that these kids don't realize that some of the stuff that they're dealing with is very minute, but they get extremely emotional about it. Like someone will say something bad online about them or something. Well, then it's like the end of the world for them, and they're very emotional about it. And so I'm starting to learn more that it's a big deal to them at this time. And I just have to step in and let them know that there's a lot more to life, and that people are going to not like you throughout life, or say mean things about you. So that's one of my learning things, is the high emotion that some of these students have here.
Thank you, Officer Pimentel. I think you wanted to add something to this.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as far as challenges, you know, when all of us have gotten into our school resource officer role, we were first in patrol. And there's policies and procedures and how we handle things, and we do them the way we feel that we're doing a good job from what the police department wants. Well, now when you come into the school, you have that piece of it still, but then you also have how the school district wants to do things, and how they expect things to be handled in their school environment. And then, so, excuse me, there's that balance between police and the school district, and finding out where that balance is. For me, that was something that took a little bit of time, just to kind of gather information and learn from different experiences. So now that I'm in my third school year, I feel like I got a good handle on what the expectations are. Now I've got previous experiences to be able to draw from, so that way when things do occur during the school day, I'm able to handle it where both entities are feeling that the situation has been handled appropriately, as well as the people that are directly impacted by that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because I think it is important. I don't know how many people do realize too that our school resource officer program really is a partnership between the district and the police department. So it's not just, I mean, one or the other. It's really like, how do we meld two completely different organizations who handled things with different, whether it be the policies and the procedures as you're talking about, where we talk about just even the threshold in meeting definitions. Officer Tuttle, you talked about like bullying or something where you're talking about bullying and harassment may have two completely different definitions, and yet you're involved both representing the school district and representing the police department. And so when they're different, how do you work together when you're both, trying to address, especially with school administration, the same incident, but as you're approaching it from different lenses. So that does certainly, so I'm glad you brought that up. Moving on to the next question, just kind of thinking about after each have kind of shared a little bit about as you've made contact and working with students and families in different situations. When you have that contact, what do you hope is a result? So after you've, intervened or someone has brought something to you, what do you hope is a result of that intervention or your involvement with the student or the family or the school?
Well, for me, I feel like anytime I have contact with, whether it's a student, staff, administrator, citizen in the community, people from the police department, I want people to feel like they've had someone who actually listens to them, cares about what it is that they're going through. Kind of tying into Officer Brown's piece about empathy, understanding what it is that they're going through and taking that into account. I think a lot of people just want to be listened to. They want to be heard. And for a lot of people, that actually helps them to de-escalate and be able to make rational decisions again. Having meaningful contacts with students in particular, because that's where most of our activity is centered around, is really important to me. And one that in particular that I can recall is when I got here, he was in sixth grade. He was a sixth grade student, and we were in the cafeteria, and I had only been here like a month or two, and I didn't know anybody. And I was walking around the cafeteria, and he's like, "I hate cops." And I was like, "Wow!" I didn't even say anything to him. I was just walking around. And so what I did was I made it a point, not necessarily in that moment, but gradually over time, to make contact with him on a regular basis, whether it's just a hi, what do you got? What are you eating today? Or, what are you watching? Or, whatever it was. And gradually over time, I kind of broke down that barrier where now that he's in eighth grade, he actually will go out of his way to like say something to me or say hi to me. And one day I was like, "Do you remember when you were in sixth grade and I was walking by and he was like, 'I hate cops'?" And he's like, "Yeah, I do remember that." And he's like, "Well, because both of my parents were arrested when I was younger, and so I had a negative impression about police." And now I think that having that contact with me, his police officer in his school, he's understood or he's learned that all police aren't bad. It was more the situation that was occurring that he had that interaction, his parents had that interaction with law enforcement. So, having those meaningful contacts and changing some perception, it's something that, I hope that anybody that comes in contact with me takes away from that experience with me.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Tying it back to, what Officer Brown said about, the empathy and the validation of, not knowing what happened up until that contact that you had at that moment. So whatever, the student saying that to you, not having that, you don't know what happened. So rather than reacting to what they said, kind of approaching it another way and in changing the insight or the influence perspective that people have. And Officer O'Donnell, you spoke about that in your opening, just talking about wanting to be able to provide a difference in what police look like. Did you want to add anything else to this question?
Yeah, Jesse's absolutely right in the relationship building part. I think a big misconception that we hear a lot of times from individuals about officers being in the schools, the school resource officers, is that they're concerned because cops in the schools mean more kids arrested, more kids cited, more kids getting in trouble, and we're there just to enforce the laws and bust kids, which is a huge misconception. Our purpose is to build relationships. That's our number one goal when we come into the schools, is to build those relationships. And a big way to do that is to go around and talk to your schools. So for example, I'll do visits with my elementary schools regularly, build those relationships, get to know them, do classroom visits where I talk about like my equipment and what being a police officer is about. And we talk about different safety topics. I do presentations in the middle schools where we talk about like internet safety and why drugs are unsafe and vaping is unsafe and that kind of those types of things. But also the critical presentations that I feel are phenomenal that we do here at Tyson is at the beginning of the school year within the first month. And then in January/February, as a reminder, we pull all the kids in to the auditorium during their Tiger Times. And we go over the whys they can't do things, because that's a huge thing for kids. Just like us as adults want to know why we have to do things a certain way, they deserve to know why our expectations are what they are as well. So we explain to them why it's important not to do certain things on social media that can get them into trouble, and explain to them those laws. We explain to them why they can't loiter or be truant at school, because explaining to those laws, what can happen as a result of that. We sit down and we explain all that to them up front, along with our expectations, just to help mitigate issues throughout the school year. Do we still occasionally have issues? Yes, obviously, because they're teenagers, right? But it minimizes it. And we see a reduction when we do those conversations and explain that to them. And that's all part of building the relationships, is we're putting it up front and we're talking to them.
Yeah, thanks for that. You just really was a great opener into our next question, because in the Humanity Project, we have been learning about the school to prison pipeline, where in many schools across the nation, we see students of color who are disproportionately disciplined, sanctioned, and arrested in comparison to their white peers. And this has been the case for 100 years. And so in thinking about, your role and thinking about police in schools, if we could continue what you just opened up for us, Officer O'Donnell, talking about how do officers either promote or prevent the school to prison pipeline, and just, more thoughts on this. Officer Brown, do you want to add to this question?
Absolutely. So I guess the question would be, how does police officers in schools prevent or promote the school to prison pipeline? For me, if I'm looking at in terms of promoting, it's not necessarily that any officer will want to go in promoting the school to prison pipeline. However, I do understand the theory and where they're getting the statistics from in that sense, where having officers in schools, and in this case, more students of color are disproportionately disciplined and sanctioned and even arrested. What I can say to that is I can only speak for myself and here in terms of what I have seen. And I know that subconscious bias can lead us to focus on some more than others. So I can speak to myself. I know that when I was at the high school, and I was very, very keen on ensuring that I worked on loitering and holding kids accountable for loitering, because what I saw was that a lot of issues, fights, and other things that were happening when kids were loitering or skipping class and not where they were supposed to be. If I have them in class and hold them accountable for being in class, then they would hopefully stay out of trouble and not end up either getting themselves harmed or harming someone else, or missing out on their valuable education. So with unconscious bias and not understanding it, I noticed for myself, and I'm speaking for myself, that at one point early on in my career as being a school resource officer, numerous kids in the hallway. However, there's a lot of attention that was being placed on kids of color. I noticed that. Now, when you look at it on paper, yes, it was kids of color. What I noticed was that it wasn't that it was kids of color that was drawing my attention. It was loud, boisterous behavior that was drawing my attention. So while I was focused on the loud laughing, the joking, the play fighting that these individuals were doing, I noticed that I'm going over there to deal with that, and there's other students who are probably walking by me, quiet, who are technically doing the same thing. They're not joking and laughing and being boisterous in the hallway, but they are still skipping class. If I looked at the stats, they're skipping class just as well. So how do I fix that? One, I need to understand what's going on there. I need to figure out a solution and understand that there's some type of unconscious bias that's happening. And then I need to make sure that I'm not buying into that. So I looked at the fact that what I need to do is any and everyone that I see, whether they're laughing or walking or quiet, if they're in the hallway, I need to address them no matter what. And that is what will tell me whether or not I'm finding someone or who's late. In this case over here at Woodworth right now, we get every single kid back to class, and then we check the attendance. The attendance is going to say who was or was not there. It takes away that unconscious bias that might be there that I may not even know that is happening. Again, a lot of times I know for myself, I get told when I'm with my brothers and sisters that we're too loud. We're not too loud. I just know that my brother's talking and making a joke, and I thought it was funny, so I'm talking very loud and I'm laughing very loud, and that's how we communicate. That can draw attention. So understanding those biases, understanding that there is the theory out there of school to prison pipeline, ensuring that you're not you're not contributing to that negativity there as a school resource officer by being ignorant of the fact that it's out there. I think those are going to be ways that we're going to ensure that we are not promoting that we're actually being part of a solution. And I also feel that being a school resource officer focus on ensuring the safety of the students and ensuring that they are being held accountable. Not that they're being held accountable, but there is consistent accountability for breaking laws, breaking rules, is going to show them that they need to that we need to adhere to these laws and rules, because right now they're students, they're kids. If they continue with that same negative behavior once they become adults, hopefully I'm teaching them that they need to adjust their behavior, because otherwise there will be real consequences that will lead them to prison. I've seen that here, holding kids accountable and showing that there is accountability for certain things has actually drastically brought down the amount of fights that we've had, drastically brought down the amount of loitering that we've had. But again, that's with that understanding that the why of what I'm doing and being conscious of that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the why, as you were talking, and Officer O'Donnell, you talked about that, the why, and with being in the schools, you have the opportunity to really proactively talk about the why, and not the why after the fact, after something's happened. And then it's like, well, this is why this was important. It's really, proactively. Does anyone else want to add to this question? And I think understanding the awareness is huge, because a lot of people don't even understand what, the bias or what opportunities you have available to learn, what this even means, the school to prison pipeline, and holding students accountable, and understanding that if students don't get the education and they don't graduate high school, like what that could mean. And we have a lot of information and many studies to really talk about what that means for individuals. Officer Pimentel, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just a quick point. I would say that, there is that mindset in people's mind that, law enforcement in schools is pro law enforcement or enforcing of laws, whether it's arrest or citations or whatnot. And I would say that the majority of my time in schools is spent trying to avoid at all costs law enforcement consequences. We always try to do the least amount first, whether it's, a lunch detention or after school detention, school consequences of some sort. And in addition to that, explaining the why, having those discussions in a way that's informative, educational, kind of like a counseling piece, if you will, where they're learning and they're growing, so that way they don't make those same mistakes in the future. And a lot of times, especially at the middle school and elementary school level, because they're so young, they're going to make mistakes. And talking to them about that, explaining the why, the consequences, the unintended consequences of their actions even, helps them make a conscious decision not to do it again. And then we avoid having to have a law enforcement consequence down the road. So, you know, for me as a school resource officer, I literally go out of my way at all possible to avoid law enforcement consequences. Does that mean that I don't do any? No, that's not, you know, there are people that didn't learn from their initial consequence, so then they have to have another consequence on top of that or in addition to it in the future, so that way they change their behavior, because really that's the goal. We want to change whatever behavior that we're seeing that is not safe or healthy or productive to an educational setting.
So I wanted to add one other piece to that, and that's the explaining the why to the kids. So oftentimes when there is a smaller consequence, the initial that we do is, like you said before, is that we're trying to look for consequences that don't fall in line with law enforcement consequences. So I typically do try to talk to the students and say, hey, the reason I'm doing this is because we are looking for change behavior from you. So when I come and talk to you and speak to you nicely and say, hey, we appreciate it if you don't do that, that's where I need you to listen, because if we continue to escalate to a certain point, now you're going to force us to have some other serious consequences. And we've intervened in school consequences, counseling, and everything else prior to that. So when you're getting those lesser consequences, we want change behavior, because that's what we're looking for there. We want to make sure that we're talking to you, that we're working with you. And part of for the city of Fond du Lac Police Department and our school resource officers, one of the main, I will say, in our memorandum of understanding for us being school resource officers and our intervention with the students, it is building professional relationships. That's what our main goal is here. We want to keep the school safe and build professional and positive relationships with the students. Those are our main focuses here. So it isn't necessarily taking kids to prison. It is not, definitely not charging students or whatever else. We understand the financial burden that it gives to the students and even their families. And our ultimate goal is to find that positive, have that be that stopping block so that they do not continue to escalate, and we get those change behaviors so that we're not having to deal with them once they're 18 and they end up with very serious charges. That's something we definitely don't want.
Yeah, thanks. I think that leads us into the last question that we'll talk about before we wrap up, which is talking about restorative practices. And you all kind of spoke to that in regards to relationships. So as we know, restorative practices is a research-based approach to school discipline and legal sanctions that often have very different results than our traditional responses and consequences. So just in your time, maybe kind of circling back as school resource officers, how do you engage in repairing harm, in restoring trust? Officer Pimentel, you kind of spoke about the story earlier, and then building relationships. So what are some other things that you do out of the lens or the approach of restorative practices to build relationships?
So I talked about it a little bit earlier. You know, I'll go down around to my elementary schools. I'll interact with the kids, go into the classrooms and do lessons on safety, and go through the police equipment, because that's always the cool attention getter for the younger kids. They like to learn about the stuff that we wear on our uniforms. I've even brought my police car and done tours of my squad car and other fun equipment in. But just being there, even for like their big events that they have, their Halloween costume marches and other events that they have, and participating with them and playing with them. On the middle school level, it's about being present when the kids are out in the hallways, talking to them, interacting with them. You know, kind of along the lines with the Officer Pimentel, when I first came here, there was a group of kids that had no issues being vocal about not having any desire to be around police or did not care for police. you know, and a lot of those kids now, they'll give me high fives or hugs in the hallways and come see me. And I have my candy jar that I have my daily visitors throughout the day come get some candy from me, and just don't tell the nurse. But no, it's about being out there, being present, building positive relationships, and not just being there during the school day, but like appearing at the dances. So I'll come and work the dances and interact with the kids when they're having fun and they're doing assembly events, you know, and then the 8th grade events that they have, and just getting those positive relationships out there. But it's also important to me. And one of the things I make sure to do is if I do have to issue a consequence to a kid or counsel them for something, that I give them that breathing room of that day. And then the next day, immediately go right back into building that positive relationship with them, asking them how their day was, their weekend was, how things are going, noticing when maybe their demeanor is off a little bit, asking them if they're okay, and just rebuilding that rapport with them right away and helping them understand that, look, you made a mistake. You ended up with a consequence as a result of your mistake. It's done. Now we move forward, no grudges, got no issues with you. You know, you're a good kid in general, but everybody makes mistakes, even adults do. And I tell the kids that all the time. You know what? Adults make mistakes too. I'm a police officer. I make mistakes. I don't know any police officers that don't make a mistake once in a while, you know, but we all suffer the consequence of our decisions and our mistakes. And then we have to move forward from that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Officer Tuttle, as a new school resource officer, just brand spanking new 3 months on, do you want to talk about how you've been able to engage in building relationships?
Sure. Well, obviously the high school is huge. So getting to know these kids, and Officer Brown talked a little bit as well. Like you pass these kids in the hallway and I won't even I've never seen this kid before, but I've been here for 3 months. So some of them just stay under the radar, and Officer Brown's correct. They might be skipping. We have 3 different lunch hours here, and sometimes the lunchroom, they're like, yep, this kid's not supposed to be here. Well, that's because they know that kid, and he is now known because he's gotten other trouble. There's other kids that they could possibly be out there for every lunch hour, and then they just blend in. So for me, yeah, getting to know the kids is important. As far as consequences for these kids, once I deal with them, I always tell them once we're done, I said, all right, well, now this is what's going to happen. But as far as our relationship, it's tomorrow we say hi in the hallway, just like a normal conversation. And they're pretty receptive to that. And I haven't had any issues. I didn't speak much on the previous one as far as the school to prison, but I did want to say that some of these consequences that you're getting as far as the school and the police department, they're not very harsh or anything. So for me, I think some of it is these kids do have repeat behaviors and they're not getting or finding consequences. Not that I want to send anyone to prison at all, but once they get older and turn 17, 18 years old, that there are serious consequences out there for adults acting this way. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents in regards to that as far as some of the consequences that we have here that we dish out. It's just they don't get immediate ramifications for their actions. It might be something in the future, and it might not be that severe that they're sort of learning that, all right, well, I didn't really have much of a consequences for my actions. And that's what I've found.
So in understanding how those consequences and the why of even having, why does someone have a consequence to their behavior? And I think in understanding because if we don't learn from our behavior, then the potential for a more serious and potentially even irreversible consequence that could have significant impact later on, which I think circles back to the proactively, this is why we do and follow these types of whether it be you're talking about internet safety before, I think Officer Donald, if you're talking about why you're in class and why it's important to get your education. And when we're not doing that, having that consequence serves as like, this is, might be small to start and has a potential to grow over time or compound or have a more substantial consequence. Well, thank you all for your time today. We are out of time, so really appreciate that. Just as we wrap up here, are there any last thoughts that you want to share with our Humanity Project participants, just in regards to your role as school resource officers, or anything else that we've talked about? Just, I guess, open up the floor if there's any last comments you want to say before we end. Officer Brown.
I'll take the time and just say thank you all for the work that you've put in. I have been able to benefit from learning about a lot of different things, inclusive, like I said before, subconscious or unconscious biases that even I may have, and understanding those things and learning about understanding those types of things has helped me to ensure that I'm able to build better relationships and genuine relationships and not fall into those holes there. For me, I'm appreciative of the work that you guys put in and the reach that you guys have had at this point. And I appreciate you allowing us to come in here to have these conversations as well.
Thank you, Officer Brown. Anyone else have any final thoughts?
I'd also like to thank you, Larice, also for your continued support and also the school district's continued support of the law enforcement officers that are in the schools. And even the ones outside of school. I know that you guys, you personally put in a lot of time and effort into making sure that you're present at some of our events from the police department and the community. So I definitely, I know the sentiment from the other SROs is the same as well. So I just want to say thank you to you personally as well.
Thanks for that.
And I just wanted to say, having participated in the Humanity Project before, it's a highly beneficial program. You learn a lot and you can take a lot away from it. If you're an individual that still has questions or doubt or anything like that, I don't know any school resource officer that wouldn't be willing to sit down and have a one-on-one conversation and answer some of your questions or your criticisms about it. And obviously everyone's entitled to their opinions, but hopefully we can help convince people to have a little more positive outlook on school resource officers in the school environment.
Thank you for that, Officer Donald. Officer Tuttle, last call for any final words.
Sure. Well, for me, I just want to let everyone know that my whole goal here is to have a safe school and to get these kids to have a graduate degree and learn normal social behaviors to go back into society with.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.